Alright, now that you've threaded your machine, you've wound your bobbin, you inserted it, and you've brought it up, all you have to do is starting to sew. The exciting part. Remember how I was talking about the needle plate? This gives us an idea what our seam allowance is going to be, so what the difference is to the finished seam to the edge of the fabric. If you're sewing a garment or anything with a pattern, you will normally have a specified seam allowance. For example, most commercial sewing patterns will give you a seam allowance of 1.5 centimeters. So I'm going to line up the edge of my fabric with 15. So you see the numbers 10, 15, 20. This tells us it's 10 millimeters from the needle, so it's a centimeter, 1.5 centimeters or 2. Or if you live somewhere where they're using imperial measurements, your sewing machine most probably will also have a line on either side with fractions of inches. We're going to use centimeters for now. I'm going to line up the edge of my fabric with 15, 1.5, so I know that when I sew, my seam will be consistent and straight. I'm lowering the presser foot down onto my fabric to keep it in place. Now, what I want to do after turning on my machine is I want to make sure I've got the right stitches set in there. So I want to do a straight stitch, A, and I want my stitch length to be between 2 and 2.5. So what you need to do is, after you've secured your fabric, you want to make sure your hands are in the right position. There is not really a right and wrong position, but there's maybe a more convenient way of holding the fabric. So being right-handed, I will hold my fabric along the edge here with this hand. And as the fabric moves along, I'm just going to guide it gently with this hand. So this one will move with the fabric. What you don't want to do is ever pull your fabric from the back, because what happens is that you're going to maybe interrupt the timing of the machine. Remember those little feed dogs that I was talking about before, which will feed your fabric just in perfect time with your needle going up and down. If you pull, then you're going to interrupt this process and you will get skipped stitches and might even break your needle, which is not what you want. So just keep that in mind. As with a car, the more you press your foot down on the foot pedal, the faster it'll go. So we're going to start putting our foot down, and I'm holding this, keeping this aligned, and you will see that my machine will start going forward. So keeping the straight edge, I'm going to go and keep this aligned with my 1.5, holding this fabric here and just moving this along to gain control. When you start going around a curve, don't get scared. Think of it as a continuous straight line as you sew. So you're really just always thinking a few centimeters ahead. And all you want to do is, as you sew, just keep this part straight against the seam guide at 1.5. And you will automatically sew a really beautiful and even curve. And I'm going around the corner again. Now you're going to come to the corner, but you might want to continue around. For example, you're sewing a cushion or a bag or anything really that has to have a corner. There's 2 ways you could do it. Of course, you could go to the end and then go across. But the better way to do it is actually to go as far as you need the seam to be. So if I still want to have 1.5 centimeters, and I want to maybe check, I'm going to lower my needle with the hand wheel, pulling it towards me until the needle is all the way down the fabric. I'm going to lift the presser foot with the lever here, and I'm just going to turn this. And I can see I'm a little bit over, so I might just turn the needle towards me to go forward one more. Just gives me better control. Making sure that the needle is lowered again, lifting the presser foot. And perfect. Now I'm 1.5 centimeters away again from the edge. So maintaining that seam allowance, I can now, at a right angle, continue to sew. The reason why you want to have the needle down is that if you're lifting the presser foot and your needle is up, your fabric will shift and you will skip a stitch, and your stitch might break. So having the needle down, you can move your fabric at any angle if you wanted to just sew along there. And you know that it'll be a perfect stitch anytime. So I'm sewing at a right angle at the moment. I'm going to continue sewing. Now when I get to the end, I want to secure my stitch. One way to do it when we're hand sewing is to tie maybe a double or triple knot. We don't really have that option. We don't really want to bother with that with the sewing machine. So really easy way to secure your stitch is what we call back tacking. On your machine, you might have a little button here, or you might have a lever along the side. On this machine, I've got it just to the right here in the front. If I press this all the way down, and you have to make sure most of the time that you hold it quite firmly, and I'm holding it importantly while I put my foot down and stitch, your machine will start stitching backwards. So it actually goes over your existing stitch, and that will lock it into place. In order to lock your stitch, you really only need to go over it 1 or 2 times. You can stitch as far back as you want, but 1 or 2 times is all that you need. Once you've done that, make sure your needle is in the up position, again by turning your hand wheel and then lifting your presser foot. You can pull it out. Now you might sometimes find that if your thread or your piece of fabric doesn't come out easily, that's because your needle might not be in the perfect position. So most of the time, the fabric comes out the easiest if your needle is all the way up, but each machine has its perfect position. So if you find you're a little bit stuck, or you get a double thread at the bottom, it's not that you've done something wrong. Just wiggle your needle until it comes out easily. When I learned sewing professionally, the first thing my teacher taught me was to always cut your thread once and right where you start and finish. So then you don't end up with all the bunching. And I have to say, this is one trick that I still use and that just has been so invaluable. So I like to pass it on to my students. So I'm cutting this, and then I'm going to cut along here as well. I do want to show you the difference between a locked stitch and one where I didn't back stitch. Back stitch or back tacking is just going backwards on your machine. So you can see that when I try to pull here, I can't really open this. This is nice and secure. So if I'm wearing a pair of pants, I know if I back stitch, it's not going to rip at the back and embarrass me. However, if I forgot to do this, I might just get this. And you don't want that. So remember to backstitch at the beginning and at the end, just as you start. You might want to try doing a circle. So you can draw one on to start with on a practice piece of fabric, or you can envision one. So for a bigger curve like this, it is quite easy to just stop and go and just move the fabric along as you sew. Having a tighter circle, you might find that you have to stop, pop your needle down and lift, just like we did when we went around the corner. There's no shame in that. Even if you're an experienced seamstress, you still have to do that. You can't sew, just like you can't go on full throttle around a tight corner in your car. Okay, so let's get started. I'm starting along my circle. I might just backstitch a couple of stitches to keep it in place. And I'm going around. And now, as I find if I'm moving around, I might just start going like this, but I really want a tighter circle like this. So again, I want to make sure my needle is all the way down. It depends on your machine. You might have a machine that actually has a button that you can press, so anytime you sew, you end up in the needle down position, which is helpful. If not, just put your hand wheel in the position for the needle to be down. And then in order to have a smooth curve and not lots of little corners in it, I'm just going to move my fabric just a millimeter or so. I'm just shifting it. And I'm doing the same thing. My needle is down. And I'm moving it a little bit, because it automatically wants to go out. And the tighter you want your curve to be, the more often you have to stop and go. Mind you though, it seems like it will take forever. But if you're used to sewing, this will be a very, very quick process. Just put it down, sew a couple, pop it down. This one already ended up down, and so on. So when you're practicing at home, I recommend just having an inexpensive piece of fabric, even drawing some lines on it that you can follow, some zigzags where you can pivot, some hearts, circles, just to give you a bit of confidence before you start on your final project. Again, if you wanted to take a piece of fabric out, you would go and turn your hand wheel until your needle is in the up position, lift your presser foot, move out your fabric, and clip your thread right next to your seam on both sides. So you can see, this is the top of where I've sewn, so this is my top thread, and this is my bobbin thread. So now you know how to sew a basic seam. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next lesson, where we're actually going to look into some more complex seams, and we're also going to start making a couple of exciting projects. So stay tuned, and I'll see you very shortly.